Imagine this. You're minding your own business, living your life, and suddenly someone shows up, plants a flag on your land and says, "It's mine now." That's colonialism in a nutshell. It's when one country decides it's the boss of another country, taking control of its land, resources, and people. Not cool, right? For centuries, powerful European nations like England, France, and Spain went on a global power trip. They sailed across the oceans, discovering lands that were already inhabited and claiming them as their own. It's like finding your neighbor's cat in your yard and telling everyone it's your new pet. They didn't just claim the land either. They started bossing around the people living there, imposing their own rules, cultures, and systems. This wasn't a friendly visit, it was a hostile takeover with long-lasting consequences. Colonialism might seem like ancient history, something you'd only find in dusty textbooks. But hold on, its effects are still felt today, shaping the world we live in, from the wealth gap between nations to the ongoing struggles for equality and justice. Okay, let's rewind a bit. Colonialism wasn't just a random, chaotic free-for-all. It followed certain patterns, with specific regions becoming prime targets. Let's call it the Colonialism World Tour, and trust me, it wasn't pretty. First stop, Africa. This vast continent, rich in resources like gold, diamonds, and rubber, became a playground for European powers. They carved it up like a birthday cake, drawing arbitrary borders that ignored existing cultures and communities. The result? Conflict, instability, and exploitation that continues to this day. Next up, Asia. From India, the jewel in the crown of the British Empire, to Southeast Asia's Spice Islands, this region faced centuries of economic plunder and political manipulation. Think of it like this. Imagine someone coming into your house, taking all your valuable stuff and then forcing you to work for them. Not a fun time. And let's not forget the Americas. From north to south, indigenous populations were decimated by disease and violence, their lands stolen and their cultures suppressed. The effects of this brutal history are still visible in the struggles faced by indigenous communities today. Here's the thing about colonialism. It wasn't about discovering new lands or spreading civilization. It was about one thing: profit. European powers saw colonies as a source of cheap labor and raw materials, a way to fuel their own economies and empires. Imagine a giant vacuum cleaner, sucking up all the wealth and resources from one place and transferring it to another. That's what colonial policies did. They forced colonized people to grow cash crops like cotton and rubber, neglecting their own food needs and making them dependent on their colonizers. It wasn't just about resources either. Colonial powers implemented systems of forced labor and taxation, essentially turning entire populations into an unpaid workforce. They controlled trade, making sure that colonies were only allowed to buy and sell goods from their colonizers, at prices set by, you guessed it, the colonizers. This systematic exploitation created a massive wealth gap between the colonizers and the colonized. Imagine two runners in a race, but one runner is forced to wear heavy chains while the other gets a head start and all the best equipment. Not exactly a fair competition, right? That's colonialism in a nutshell. Okay, so colonialism is over, right? Well, yes and no. While most colonies gained independence in the 20th century, the scars of colonialism run deep, shaping the world we live in today. Remember that wealth gap we talked about? It's still here. Many former colonies continue to struggle with poverty, underdevelopment, and political instability, a direct result of centuries of exploitation. They're like runners trying to catch up in a race where the finish line keeps moving further away. It's not just about economics either. Colonialism left behind a legacy of social and political turmoil. Remember those arbitrary borders drawn in Africa? They created ethnic tensions and conflicts that continue to this day. And the cultural damage, many former colonies are still grappling with the loss of their languages, traditions, and identities. Colonialism's legacy is a complex and painful one, but it's a conversation we need to have. By understanding the roots of global inequality, we can start to address the imbalances and injustices that persist today. Because remember, history isn't just something we read about in textbooks, it's the foundation on which our present and future are built.